Kentucky basketball has one of the deepest and most experienced teams in the country, so it doesn't really matter who ends up starting for the Cats.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, I'm going to explain why I believe it doesn't really matter who ends up starting for the Kentucky Wildcats. We can speculate over the rotation as much as we want, but the starters, it may not really matter at the end of the day. Also on today's episode, some recruiting news, really positive things coming out of the recruiting trail. 2 prospects setting visits with Kentucky, one happening this weekend, one happening in about 10 days. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Before we dive into the show here today about whether or not the starters really matter, and I would love your opinions in the comments below or at Locked On UK on Twitter, so where you can also find me. There is a Google form linked in the description of this episode, regardless of whether you're on YouTube or on podcast, wherever you are tuned in. Go and click that link. I want you, through that Google form, to predict every single game on Kentucky basketball's schedule. Tell me the wins and losses for every single contest. Tell me how far you think Kentucky will make it in the postseason, who's going to lead in points per game, assists, rebounds. I want all of your information there. Give me your takes. It is in that Google form. Should take you no more than 2 or 3 minutes to fill out. Go ahead and do it. We've got about 200 of you that have responded, and whenever we get closer to the beginning of the season, I'm going to dive into all of your answers. Would love your feedback here. Want to know what you think about the upcoming season. Some of you have been commenting about it recently, and I appreciate it. All right, so this is pretty much what I got on tap here with my notes. I've also got a Google Doc open here, so we're going to dive into question. Does it matter what Kentucky's starting 5 is? Does it matter what it looks like? Do the starters themselves, does it actually matter that they're going out on the court first? I think that this is a question that would have been answered differently a season ago. The way Kentucky started basketball games a season ago was extremely frustrating. It was very difficult for the Wildcats to get out to a lead or at least start strong or solidly at all with the rotation that they threw out at the beginning of the game. This was something that was well documented all throughout last season, but last season. We don't have to focus on that now. Last year, it would be a different answer. The answer would be, yes, it does matter who Kentucky starts, and frankly, they should be starting Shepherd. They should probably be starting possibly Dillingham at times, and we're getting to see those 2 guys tear it up in the NBA preseason right now. But this year, I don't necessarily know if it does, at least on paper right now. Now, we may have a conversation later on this year, even potentially, not before the end of the season, where we look at this roster and we say, okay, some guys are better than others. Some guys fit with the system better than others. Some guys are more efficient. Some guys are just overall playing better. So these are the guys that should start in or have more minutes than some of these other guys. Sure, that's something that we could do. But on paper, there is so much to work with here that I think it's fair to say this is one of the deepest Kentucky teams that we've seen in a long time. Now, is the depth here quality? Is the team here overall quality? That's an answer that we can't, or that's a question that we can't quite answer right now. But on paper, all of these guys are pretty much on the same playing field in terms of talent, in terms of ability. I think Kentucky's kind of got themselves here with a pretty solid bunch, all the way down to the 12th man in their rotation, who right now in my notes is Trent Noah. We'll discuss how the rotations could look as we get closer to the season opener on October 23rd. And yes, I'm counting the exhibitions. I don't care. Fight me. This right now is how the starting 5 projects according to myself and according to John Rothstein. Lamont Butler at point guard, Koby Brea at shooting guard, Jaxson Robinson at small forward, Andrew Carr at power forward, and then Amari Williams at center. What Koby Brea said yesterday after the Kentucky Basketball Pro Day makes me kind of start to dance around, okay, whether or not he's going to be the starter, because the broadcast asked him a couple different questions about coming off the bench and how important it is to provide a spark. And he really leaned into it as well, talking about how he knows his role. It's about accepting your role. It's about knowing what the team needs from you coming out of the break, coming out of different things. That makes me pause and say, okay, is Otega Oweh actually going to start at shooting guard? And this kind of plays into the conversation I wanted to have today, kind of about whether or not it really matters. I think this example is a perfect example, or this position is a perfect example of what we're discussing here. Brea, I think, is a lights out shooter. One of the best in the country, if not the best, in my opinion, the best. Otega Oweh, really solid two-way player, shot well from three a season ago, tough physical finisher at the rim, but also prides himself on his defense. He's a really solid defender to boot. You've got two guys here that are really, really good at individual things, and I think if you started one over the other, nobody would really be upset. And on top of this, I think it would be encouraged to play them an equal amount. They're both pretty good players. With Lamont Butler and Kerr Kriisa, this has been a topic all throughout the offseason. Butler, best defender Kentucky has on roster, hands down. Kriisa, best assist man Kentucky has on roster, I think hands down. One of the best shooters as well, and just overall, just a spark, whether you want him starting or off the bench. But Butler is going to be the one leading the charge here, and if Kerr Kriisa was the one that ended up starting, I don't think anybody would be complaining. Nobody's complaining either way about Butler or Kriisa starting. Nobody's complaining either way if Brea or Oweh starts. Robinson, I think, because of the fact that he came off the bench last year, it's funny. Yesterday on the broadcast, they made an interesting note. Jaxson Robinson at 14.2 points per game led the Cougars a season ago in points. That's the first time in BYU history that a player off the bench led the team in scoring. He could be comfortable in a similar role. I mean, he honestly could. You could put Brea at the 2. You could put Otega at the 3. You could have Robinson come off the bench with whatever rotation you want there with Travis Perry, Kerr Kriisa, Andrew Carr, Brandon Garrison. You could do a ton of different things with this, man. So you could have Kriisa, Perry, Robinson. You could have, Kriisa, Perry, Robinson, Almonor. You could have Brandon Garrison in there. You could put Carr at the 5 if you really wanted to. There's so many different things you could do with this rotation. And the way that I have it laid out here, I don't necessarily think it matters, like almost at all. There's almost no drop-off. If I wanted to read to you, after what we saw on Pro Day yesterday with how well Travis Perry played, if I wanted to read to you what would be the sub-in starting 5, if we were platooning, and we're not, if we were just subbing these guys in, and all 5 out, subbing 5 new guys in, how do you feel about Kerr Kriisa, Travis Perry, Otega Oweh, or possibly Koby Brea, depending on what happens, Ansley Almonor, and Brandon Garrison? I mean, you've got one of the best scorers at FDU a season ago. You've got a former McDonald's All-American that is really standing out in terms of effort and energy and defense. You've got possibly either one of the best shooters in the country or one of the best two-way players in the country. You've got a 4-star freshman that has insane upside. And you have one of the best guards coming out of the portal, also one of the best catch-and-shoot players in the nation, according to Synergy. That's a pretty good rotation. And also, by the way, here's a former top 35 player in Colin Chandler ready to come off the bench. And here's Trent Noah, a sharpshooter that apparently has made massive strides throughout this offseason, arguably more than anybody on the roster, according to Coach Pope. I really, really like Kentucky's depth. Now, is there high-end stuff when they get going, the best of the best the Kentucky Wildcats can offer this season? Is it going to win you every single game, or is it going to keep you in every single game? I don't know. No idea. But I don't think on paper that there's a ton of drop-off. And if you started that backup 5, Kriisa, Perry, we'll say Brea right now for the sake of argument, Almonor and Garrison. I mean, that's still a top half team in the SEC. I think. I don't really think it matters. what Kentucky does with their starting five. I think it's fun to speculate. I think the rotation and the amount of possessions each player is used is going to be a fascinating conversation, because just based on what we saw at Pro Day, everything seems pretty balanced right now. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Does it really matter who Kentucky starts? Does it actually matter? Who do you want to see starting? How do you think this rotation is going to shake out? You can leave all of that in the comments below. All right, we're going to continue along here with some recruiting news. Nikola Bundalo has set a visit with Kentucky. He was offered back in June, and ladies and gentlemen, he is coming in October. Before we dive into the news surrounding Nico, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Roy. It's time for the Roy Player of the Week, and the Roy app lets you directly support your favorite athletes. Unlike collectives, where you make a donation to a general fund, Roy lets you choose the specific athlete you want to support. You back the players you care about, and in return, you get exclusive content after the season, like personal videos and updates. And the best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't create the content, you get your money back. And this week, I'm continuing to go and choose Dane Key as my player of the week for his incredible performances, back-to-back 100-yard-plus receiving performances against Ole Miss and Ohio. Big in the win over Ole Miss just a couple of weeks ago. I contributed $100 to his campaign on Roy, and I want you to join me by making a payment of as little as $10. When enough of us contribute, it's not just about the bucks, it's about the message we send to Key or whoever you want to support on the Kentucky Wildcats. Our collective support helps keep him connected to our school. Plus, Roy is doing their part to bring fans closer to their schools and athletes with an exciting giveaway. Roy is giving one lucky fan 2 tickets to any game of their choice in November. And here's how you can enter. Just download the Roy app in the App Store or Google Play Store and use code LOCKEDON when signing up. And there you go. You're entered. If you're already on Roy, you can make a payment to any athlete's campaign, and you'll also be automatically entered. Super simple, really awesome stuff. No purchase necessary. It's void where prohibited. You can go to joinroy.com for official rules, and you can download Roy today and try it out. Again, there's no subscription, no recurring fees, and for as little as $10, you can get into the NIL game. That's Roy. Support the players and change the game. All right, continuing along here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. And again, want to remind you guys, the Google form in the links or at the link in the description, go fill it out. Let me know what you think about the upcoming season. We will be discussing your answers in depth on an upcoming episode of Locked On Kentucky. All right, so we have 4-star forward Nikola Bundalo. We talked about him back in June 14th to be specifically. He has been offered by the Wildcats, and he is taking an official visit. According to Jacob Polachek of KSR, friend of the program, he will take an official visit during the weekend of October 18th. The 6'10", 205-pound power forward from Prolific Prep out of Napa, California, has already taken official visits to UConn, Michigan State, Ohio State, and UNC. Kentucky, according to Polachek, has hosted several of its top prospects for official visits this fall. UK hosted 5-star forward Caleb Wilson from September 13th to 15th, and then they hosted, obviously, Mikel Brown Jr. and 5-star forward Chris Senack on the same weekend earlier, back in September 27th through 29th. Kentucky is also not done, as Polachek notes, hosting recruits for the fall. We'll get into the second one here later on in the show. But Nikola Bundalo right now, according to On3, 6'10", 205-pound forward, number 25 player nationally, number 7 power forward, number 4 player out of the state of California. According to On3, that's their industry ranking. On their raw player rating, they have him as the number 17 player overall. 24/7 Sports has him as the number 31. ESPN has him at 25, and Rivals has him at 30. And if you want to go over to 24/7 Sports, and I know this is a 4-star, according to 24/7 Sports, he is a composite 5-star player, top 26 player nationally, according to 24/7 Sports. So this is a 5-star prospect. And he finally got evaluated by 24/7 Sports earlier in August. We were talking about him and breaking him down way back in June. And I said on my episode, and this was the whole purpose of the show, he is, in my mind, he is an NBA Anthony Davis type player. He has that type of skill set. At 6'10", 6'11" in some spots, he can put the ball on the floor and he can finish with either hand consistently. He's got a solid post-up game. He can be explosive dunking the ball at the rim. He is a great offensive rebounder. And on top of all of this, he is a confident outside shooter, a southpaw, and he can absolutely knock it down. He's an improved defender. This is something he talked about earlier this summer about improving defensively. This is a pure stretch four who will likely thrive in a more up-tempo, free-flowing offense. That's what I had to say earlier in June. This is what Director of Scouting Adam Finkelstein had to say about Bundalo back in August. Bundalo is an inside-out lefty four-man with good positional size, athleticism, and deceptive strength. He has good bounce around the rim, a great right hand. While his frame doesn't boast a ton of visible muscle mass, he plays through contact fairly well. He's a legit low-post scoring threat who understands angles and is especially effective sealing off defenders prior to the catch for easy buckets. Bundalo is equally capable of facing the basket and has a soft touch that extends to the arc with ease. He can play out of pick and pop action and is a reliable three-point shooter when he's in rhythm, but gets much less efficient when he tries to jab into threes or shoot off the dribble. Bundalo has a bit of a high dribble and isn't really a creator, although he's capable of driving a closeout. He's both versatile and comfortable playing various spots on the floor with different types of offensive actions, seemingly picking up concepts quickly, and yet he is not always an overly willing passer. The most important variable for Bundalo is his overall intensity. He's hyper-competitive, and when he can harness that while maintaining full control of his emotions, he's extremely effective on both ends of the floor. When that fire burns too hot, though, it can be detrimental, with implications on his shot selection, decision-making, and overall mentality. Overall, Bundalo is a prospect who can experience some highs and lows, but has a terrific combination of size, deceptive strength and athleticism, and crafty inside-out skill. This is not what you were seeing from Anthony Davis during his time with the Wildcats and not for his first few seasons in the NBA. Over the past several years, Anthony Davis has developed more of a handle. He's developed an outside shot. He's become more of a stretch four. He can play between the 4 and the 5 comfortably. This is somebody that I look at with Bundalo. If he puts on a little bit more weight, gets a little bit more physical, I think that he is like he's a very, very good comparison. He's good around the rim. He's good from beyond the arc. He can handle the ball. He can finish through contact. He can do everything, on top of being a solid defender to boot. This is somebody that Kentucky wants to continue to go after. I'm excited that he's taking an official visit this month. Obviously, like I mentioned, North Carolina, Ohio State, Michigan State, UConn feels pretty good about where they are with him right now. This would be a huge get for Mark Pope in Kentucky simply because of the pace of play and the style of play that they like to have. Now, the not being willing to pass the ball a ton is a touch concerning, especially given what Kentucky wants out of their 4s and their 5s in that department. But Bundalo is an NBA type player. This is the exact type of player that the NBA is looking for. If he gets everything under control a little bit, this is somebody that could come in and be not a glue guy, but somebody that kind of holds things together for Kentucky all around for a season. I see this as a one and done type player who could be really, really good in the NBA and beyond. So let me know what you think about Nikola Bundalo. We're going to talk about another recruiting prospect here in Acaden Lewis, who has set an official visit this Friday. Before we dive into that, though, wrapping up the show, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can keep the season going with a big return on FanDuel because they are America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is over at FanDuel.com. Again, to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, wrapping up the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. We're diving into recruiting news, and Acaden Lewis has set an official visit. He's already taken visits to UConn and Duke. both back in September and early here in October, and he has decided he wants to go ahead and take a look at Kentucky. I thought this would be coming in a few weeks. He wants to do it this week. 6'3", 170-pound guard out of Baltimore, Maryland, will be coming to Big Blue Madness from October 11th through the 13th, according to Jacob Polacek of KSR. Last time he was on Kentucky's campus, he got an offer, and now he's coming back for another visit. And this is what Lewis had to say to Polacek. I want to experience Kentucky. I want to see what it would be like if I were to go there and be there on the team. Big Blue Madness would be pretty insane. As we know, Jasper Johnson, Malachi Marino, Caleb Wilson, among the players that have gotten really excited about playing alongside Lewis. And I would just encourage you guys here, when we're done on the show today, first of all, go fill out that Google form first, if you've not done it already. Thank you to everybody that has. Go and check out Acaden Lewis and the most recent, like European circuit highlights. It's from like 10 days ago. You can go and look it up on YouTube. If you just search Acaden Lewis, go and watch what he is able to do in transition, in isolation, in spot-up situations. This is all I have for the final segment here. This is the only note I have. The kid is just a bucket, dude. To have him and Jasper Johnson, two taller, left-handed players that can knock down from anywhere in the backcourt at the same time next year, gracious, that would be fun to watch. I mean, that would just be really, really fun to watch. If you're not able to get them on the floor at the same time, Otega Oweh comes back. Look, you've got somebody strong at your one, and you've got somebody at your two. You've also got Travis Perry possibly coming back. Man, that's such a good backcourt, dude. You've got scoring, you've got defense, you've got passing. Get somebody like Acaden Lewis in here, man. He would be special. And he thinks that he and Jasper work really well together. They played earlier this summer. And this is what Lewis said to Polacek. They really want me and see me as a key piece in this class that brings everything together. They think Jasper Johnson and I work really well off of each other, and Malachi Marino and I formed a bond after the top 100 camp when I blew up and got my Kentucky offer. We played in the Elite 24. I think Lewis and Johnson played in AAU. I may be wrong, though. I'm familiar with both of their games, Lewis said. It would be great for all three of us to play together. This is a final three of Kentucky, UConn, and Duke for Acaden Lewis. He is expected to commit before the early signing period in November. So we're gonna get an announcement here in the next month or so about Acaden Lewis. The kid is a scorer. He's a really, really good passer and a solid defender. He wants to make sure everybody knows that he is a playmaker. But man, he can score. I mean, just flat out, dude. I want this kid running my offense next season. It would be special if Kentucky was able to get him. He can score from anywhere. He can drive, he can shoot, he can pass. It's everything you want from a high-octane, high-profile guard. And I can just see it now. I can see him now playing so well in transition with that up-tempo pace that Mark Pope wants. This is the type of guard that you want. Bucket getter. Pair him with somebody like Nikola Bundalo, man. I mean, all of a sudden, you've got your power forward position figured out possibly for next season. Woo, you start to look really, really good all across the board if you're the Cats. So let me know what you think in the comments below. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDahl_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless. Go fill out that Google form.